Hello, my name is John Smithin, and I'm the research director of the Aurora Philosophy Institute here in Aurora, Ontario, Canada. With me today is my longtime friend, colleague, and co-author, Professor Omar Hamouda. Omar is Professor Emeritus of Economics at Glendon College, York University, Toronto, and is the editor of the Journal of Income Distribution. Welcome, Omar.
Thank you, John. Thank you for having me.
No, you're very welcome. So I think that what we're planning to do is at least a series of 3 videos in total. Today we are going to talk about the nature of money, what a philosopher would call the ontology of money, and the implications that this has for monetary theory and for macroeconomics. Later, I think we will have a session on your forthcoming book, A Likely Story, a very English-sounding title.
Thank you.
if I may say so. And then finally, we will do a historical video, you might call it, on 3 very famous monetary theorists, Keynes, Hayek, and Wicksell. So, Omar, would you like to tell us a bit about why you're interested in these topics? For example, what is your book going to be about? Or what is your book about? And so forth.
Well, the likely story is partly about the reality of the world in which we live and partly fictitious. So it's mainly about how the wealth is created and how it is distributed and how accumulation of capital through time has changed the way we consider, all these micro variables, which explains how, basically how production comes into being, how various actors interact between themselves. And so the capital accumulation through time has led us to how should I say, to what is dominating our thinking these days is
Financialization?
it's not financialization, it's the AI,
the artificial intelligence.
Artificial intelligence, and how the artificial intelligence now,
which is certainly artificial,
really changing
yeah,
fundamentally our way of life and how we relate to each other.
No, that's very true. I mean, I think it's certainly artificial, but it's not very intelligent. That's the way that I would put it.
So it goes through various stages. I start with an economy, a simple economy, which basically is based on labor alone to produce the wealth, and how capital comes into being, and the role of intermediaries, the role of merchants, the role of various institutions, and how that through time gave us the sophisticated world in which we live today. And the common thread in the whole thing is income distribution, where our understanding of what money is, because money is the central, it's the central component that created this accumulation of capital through time.
Yeah.
So I played a little bit with this artificial intelligence, and I submitted, for instance, lyrics for each period to them, and I got these beautiful songs, which probably will.
So maybe what we'll do then is, like, when we put this video up,
Yeah.
what I'll do is I'll interpose
some of the some
some of
of
the
those songs,
some of these
which are,
songs. Yeah.
I mean, on the one hand,
No,
I mean,
I
it's
thought you were going to put in the Pink Floyd thing,
no, no,
no,
it
no,
wasn't.
but
It
it's
was
not.
really Pink
No,
Floyd.
it's something that you've done. It's something that you.
That's me,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So the
Okay.
lyrics, for instance, for the first one, uh, is a bunch of settlers which come into an island, and
Yeah.
so the music you get through that is this natural world where you hear the song, the song of birds and the water falling.
Oh,
And then you get to the next one where the institutions start becoming quite important in the determination
yeah.
of how we produce, how
Well,
we distribute.
this is great.
Yeah, yeah,
So we
yeah.
will definitely play it. So anyhow, you and I have been talking about these things actually for a very long time, and I'm astonished how long it is. It's almost 50 years,
Mhm.
right? We don't look it, but it's almost 50 years. In fact, I don't know if you recall this, but on September the 1st, 1975, you and I were both on the same flight from Paris, Charles de Gaulle Airport to Kennedy Airport, New York City. We jointly discovered America, so to speak, at that time. Now, we didn't know each other then,
Mhm.
but that was rectified very shortly after. And we started these discussions, and we've been discussing money and macroeconomics kind of ever since. But from my point of view, it's very good to have your current thoughts, on these issues.
On that period,
No, no, no. I mean, I'm pointing out that we've been doing this for a long time,
yeah.
right?
Well, I'll come back to the money in a minute.
Uh, but now, like we've been doing it a long time, but 50 years later, you have now arrived at a mature position,
Mhm.
shall we say? Is it fair?
Yeah, you see, my training was at Essex University, and
Yeah,
I was fortunate of having good teachers there,
yeah,
Tony Atkinson,
yeah,
Christopher Bliss. And just before I arrived at Essex, David Laidler was there, Leipzig,
yeah,
University of
yeah,
Leipzig. I mean, these are quite important,
yeah, very much
economists
so.
of the
Very much so.
time.
Yeah,
So while at Essex, I didn't really, as an undergraduate, which I didn't pay much attention to the economics. But it's only when I arrived in North America, in Canada, that I realized the potential that I got from them.
yes.
So it's true. I mean, we flew probably, I think we were on the same flight.
It was the same
We
flight.
didn't know each other.
Yeah, it's from
So,
September the
yeah.
1st, and it was I forget the
Yeah.
airline, but it was from Charles de Gaulle
I
to
think it's
Kennedy.
Virgin Airlines. They just started those cheap flights,
No,
from,
no,
wasn't
Virgin
Virgin?
much later. It was,
Anyway,
and never mind it.
it doesn't really matter.
Basically, it was the only way I could afford to get there. No way
So
I could have.
the what happened at Essex or at McMaster,
Yeah.
I found the level really dismal. I mean, I was bored to death.
Uh,
Uh,
do you want to badmouth the institute?
no, no.
Yeah, fair enough.
What
No,
I'm
say, no.
saying,
Okay, go. No,
my
go ahead.
training then gave me much more than what
Oh, you were ahead of
had.
where. Yeah,
So basically, we were spending our time trying to find, playing football,
yeah,
and that's how we got together. You, John Phoebe, and many others. I mean, we spent probably
yeah.
more time playing
John
football than
John Cusack, I do
John
remember.
Cusack.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah, yeah, yeah.
and that was a long time
Long,
ago.
long time ago. Um, I was sort of disappointed with, how can I put it? The sort of strictly mathematical emphasis. And one thing that I did do, and I do respect the teachers that we had there. And, I stayed on to do a PhD at McMaster. Um, but I discovered there was a mathematical book by Alpha C. Chang. Do you
Mhm.
remember that
Yeah, I
book?
remember. Yeah.
And I realized that all you had to do was work through that book. And then, in a sense, in the different courses, we didn't actually discuss Keynes and Hicks and, all of those great thinkers, Bixell, the thinkers that you and I subsequently came to like. And
Mhm.
and no in the case of Hicks. Um, it liberated me in one sense, but it also disappointed me in another. I could just work through that book and I could pass all the exams in the different courses, to save time. Now, this is not a failing of the particular institution. I think it's a failing of the economics profession. I would put it like that way at that time, and a fortiori today, where it's just perceived as like doing math, and little or no thought is given. This is a philosophy channel. Little or no thought is given to the underlying social ontology, I think it's fair to call it, both of money and, of course, also of capital. What is this thing called capital? We talk a lot about it, but what actually is it? Very hard for people to come up with a conclusion as to what that kind of thing is. Anyhow, there's a book I wrote maybe 12 years ago, and in that I talked about the recurring debates in monetary economics. And I identified, 5 of these debates, and probably I should just list what those debates are, and then maybe we can talk about each of them in turn. Is that okay?
That's fine.
Yeah. So, first of all, the first one I would like to discuss is, as we just mentioned, the debate about the ontology or the nature of money, which I think is all important. Number 2 is, how does money get into the economy? How is money created? And how is money destroyed? The third one, veering towards the more practical level, what is the main monetary policy instrument that can be used to determine the pace of money and credit creation? Number 2, what determines the real, and I'm stressing real, what determines the real rate of interest on loans of money? And then the fifth one, fairly obviously, how do monetary changes, and to anticipate what we're going to be talking about later, I'm going to say interest rate changes, how do these changes affect the other economic variables, inflation, growth, and unemployment, and so forth? So let's start with the social ontology. The question I would ask here is, what is money? What's its underlying nature? Is money a medium of exchange? There's that term medium of exchange, which originated with barter, and that's what conventional economic theory would have it. And then, as I say, having accepted that point, you just go on to the math. You just solve the math. Or, much more interestingly, is it in fact a means of payment of debt? And I'm going to use the term that Jeff Ingham uses, a social relation of indebtedness, as Jeff Ingham and others have argued. Where do you stand on these issues?
You see, John, we are bombarded with information about prices, the price level, money and employment, purchasing power. And this happens every day. I mean, the ordinary people are skeptical about the information about these, what are we saying about inflation and purchasing power. The media just report what economists tells them. What is the inflation? What is money? What does the money do to prices and so forth? Economists themselves disagree profoundly about how prices, money, output are related to each other. The miracle formula which holds them together is this NV equal PT.
What is M? What is V? What is P?
What is M?
Yeah,
What is V?
yeah,
What is T?
yeah,
Is T transaction? Is it output?
yeah,
Is it output in money terms? And so basically, it depends of their understanding of what this formula is. For some, it is just tautology, in the sense that on the one hand, you have the money in the hand from the macro point of view, you have the money in the hands of people, which they spend. On the other hand, is the transaction that takes place. Yeah, by definition, whatever is spent on the things that people have bought.
yeah,
What I give you is what you receive.
yeah,
Sorry, what I give you is what I receive.
yeah.
So it is tautology. From that tautology then comes, and just let me get back to this formula, MV for PT, and usually we call that the equation of exchange.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay? And out of the equation of exchange, Fisher thought, and then this goes back even to
This is Irving Fisher, the Yale
Irving
economist.
Fisher, Yale, and this goes back to even to David Hume. Their understanding of that formula is different. You see,
Yeah.
Irving Fisher says ultimately, if whatever money is created will be translated into the level of prices.
Yeah.
If you double the money, you will
Double.
double the prices. Now, David Hume thought that that will happen through time. Eventually, the species come into the country, people
Yeah.
will spend it, and slowly the prices start rising, and eventually, whatever the amount of species you have in the country equals to the level of prices. That's how Irving Fisher looked at it in different way.
Yeah.
And that's where we get this quantity theory of money. Quantity theory of money tells you that at any point in time, whatever production, whatever goods you have are there, the velocity doesn't change. Therefore, any change in money will translate itself into the change in prices.
But I have to laugh about David Hume, by the way, from the philosophical point of view. He's the great skeptic. You can't see causality. But when he does his own work, he's perfectly okay with that. He knows that the causality goes from money to prices or whatever it is, right?
So that's the quantity theory of money.
Yeah, but the point is, Hume would say to other scientists, "Oh, you can't make statements like that." But then when he tries to do it himself, it's perfectly okay to make statements. I'm just ranting about Hume here as a philosopher. Sorry, I interrupted you.
This relationship between the prices, velocity, the prices on one hand and the output or the transaction on one side, and the money and velocity on the other side, or what's so-called the quantity theory of money, is quite tricky.
Yes.
You see, although the early economists, whether it's Fisher, whether it's Wicksell, whether it's Keynes, whether it's Hayek, they do see, they accept the quantity, the quantity equations. And as Harold said once, you can adhere to the quantity equation without accepting the quantity theory of money.
Yes. Who said that?
Harold.
Harrod.
The English.
You're right, Harrod. Yeah.
And all of them agree with that. I mean, let's take Fisher. The theory, this quantity theory of money, the theory is correct in the sense that the level of prices varies directly with the quantity of money in circulation, provided the velocity of circulation of that money and the volume of trade which it is obliged to perform are not changed.
Yes.
So if the quantity of if the velocity of money doesn't change, if the level of transaction doesn't change, of course, you're only left with price on one hand and money on the other. Yeah. Any increase in the money here will increase the prices.
Yes.
So this is Fisher. Now let me just see what I have. The objection here. And you remember this probably from your early. Okay, there it is. Now, the objection from Fisher himself, it says, since period of transitions are the rule and those of equilibrium the exception, the mechanisms of exchange is almost always in dynamic rather than in static condition.
Yeah, so
Which
he
means
wasn't
you
as
cannot
naive
have-
as
it's naive to think there
yeah.
is unique and corresponding correlation between prices and money.
Yes.
And the banks, that's what they do now. I mean, they do accept that there is exactly the same. If the prices are going up, let's increase the money. Sorry, let's decrease the money so we can reduce the inflation, and vice versa.
Yeah.
Now, Vixel, the same thing on the same topic. Among things that have been, this is concerning the quantity theory of money.
Yeah.
Among things that they're to be supposed to remain equal are some of the flimsiest and more intangible factors in the whole of economics.
Yeah.
In particular, the velocity of circulation of money, to which, in fact, all others can be more or less directly referred back. It is consequently impossible to decide a priori whether the quantity theory is in actual fact true. In other words, whether price and the quantity of money move together in practice.
Yeah. I mean, actually, we're sort of kind of moving into the second of our two topics, which comes into, how does money get into the economy in the first place, right?
Yeah, we'll get back to that, but let's just see that whether we can establish, I mean, the controversy is this between the economists. Is there correlation and one-to-one correlation between prices and money?
Well, I think obviously not.
Yeah, you say that. I mean, that's the position of Keynes. That's the position of all these authors that I'm citing. That's a position probably of the most post-Keynesians, but it's not the position of the dominant theory.
No, yes.
So we just take the MV for PT as granted. We stick that into our model as if it is, and money is neutral in that sense.
Yeah.
And then come into these all, I'm not talking about the theory itself. It's the consequence of the theory, the conclusions of theory in terms of developing policies of what the central bank should do, or how should we react, if you like, to the question of inflation, or to the question of the rise in interest rate and so forth.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think we are getting into this business of how does money get into the economy in the first place. We already begun to talk about endogenous versus exogenous money. The monetary circuit, in France and Italy, they have this concept of the monetary circuit, which came from Marx, M, C, C prime, M prime. We're already touching into this, the role of the banking system, right? The role of credit creation and so forth. I mean, what are your views on those topics now?
Well, you see, in mid-60s, Friedman gave, he gave his presidential address in which he stressed that the difference between the monetarists and the Keynesians was that they both have a model with a missing equation.
Yeah.
So what is this missing equation? He says for the Keynesians, to complete the model, they have to assume that prices are constant. Whereas for the monetarists, they assume that output is constant. And where did he get that? He got that from Keynes, from chapter 21, where Keynes was saying, if you were to increase the money supply, so long as the economy is at the level of underemployment, an increase in money supply will lead to an increase in output.
Yeah.
The moment you reach the full employment, any increase in the money supply will lead to the increase in prices. So you have this, an angle or
L-shape, they call it.
L-shape.
Yeah.
But Keynes himself said this is true if you live in the world, and this is what the people don't read the next of what Keynes is saying.
We're talking about chapter 1 of the general theory, chapter 21 of the general theory. Changes in money wages. No, it's not.
How the money supply relates to inflation and to output.
There's chapter 21. The other one is chapter 19.
And he says this is from a macro perspective. This is true if you were in a world where all resources get exhausted at the same time when you reach the level of unemployment. And he gave a lot of conditions on which it is not true, which means that any change in the money supply will affect both the prices and the prices and the level of employment, or by level of employment meaning the increase in the output. So now for the Keynesians, I mean, just talking, we'll go back to the post-Keynesian in a minute. For the Keynesians, if your supply is vertical, if you are on the part of vertical part of the supply, the aggregate supply, of course, an increase in the money supply will increase the level of employment. So they say, well, why don't we just let the government, let the monetary authority increase the money supply, and we will be better off. For the opposite, the Friedmans and the monetarists, they believe in a world which is always in equilibrium. Because it is in equilibrium, any increase in the money supply will lead definitely to an increase in prices. So therefore, the interpretation of that magical formula, which is MV equal PT, is interpreted differently, whether you believe it's whether it's just a truism, whether it's tautology, so an increase in money will lead to an increase in prices, proportionally, or what the Keynesians, and then I bring Keynes now into the things, is it's not the tautology itself that is important, it's the dynamics of the relationship between the money creation and what's the effect of the money creation on both on prices and
but I'm going to push you on this though. The M in MV equals PT or MV equals PY, is that fixed and then arbitrarily changed, or is it endogenously created through the banking system?
Well, that's in a simple term. The people who believe we are on the flat part, they think money is endogenous. You just use the money. You increase the money, that will that will increase the level of the production, that will increase the level of employment, and so forth. Whereas if you're on the other side, if you believe that your economy is, the monetarist or the general, I mean, I think this is probably true of all the dominant neoclassical economics, that what changes the level of output is not the money. What changes is technology, is the progress, is the...
But I would argue, not that you're always on the flat part, I would argue that in point of fact, you're always on at least an upward sloping part.
That's Keynes' position, which you agree with Keynes.
Oh, yeah, absolutely, And the way I think about Keynes in the treatise, in his book, The Treatise on Money, which was in 1930, he definitely did have a... how can I put it, a sophisticated discussion of the banking system, central banking, and so forth. And again, to use our expression, money was definitely endogenous. When he came to the general theory, he said something like, let technical monetary detail fall into the background. And tactically, I think that was a mistake. He should have kept in the technical monetary detail.
But he has, John.
You and I would disagree on that, but explain your point.
He has. You see, the treatise on money and the general theory are absolutely fused together. It was much more detailed, much more general in the treatise, Keynes spent 1/3 of the volume 1 of the treatise explaining what money is, the definition of money, the definition of prices, the definition. Whereas in the general theory, he tried to simplify the whole thing. He says, well, let's just assume that there are just only one type of assets. There is only, the ideas of the inducement to save in the treatise became the marginal efficiency of capital in general theory.
Yeah.
The ideas of spending on consumption goods became the marginal propensity to consume in general theory. The financial aspect, all that he discussed in the treatise, became the liquidity theory, the liquidity preference in general theory. And we'll come back to this, just now. I'm just going to read you something from Keynes. And,
please.
And then you just react to that. So back to this M equal to PT, back to this magical formula that created havoc among economists and the disagreement. It says, it is conceivable that the cash deposit may remain the same. The velocity of money of circulation may remain the same. The volume of money transaction may remain the same. And the volume of output may remain the same. Everything is constant. Yet, the fundamental price level may change.
Yes.
Now, how could you have P? T equals MV. So, M is constant. V is constant. On the other side, T is constant, and yet the price changes. Can you think of this?
Well, notice he uses the word cash. You're going to have to get into the debt again. This question of what is the money supply, right? If you think of the money,
you just said the word debt. That's very good. You put your finger on.
Yeah.
It means that magical equation, M equal PT, is not sufficient to explain the level of price. The price can change because there is something else.
Yes. Yeah.
So that's how he came with this distinction between, he says that out of the money, there is part of it which depends on the level of income, and there is part of it which depends on the interest rate. Now we're getting the interest rate.
Yes.
So the part which is money is an asset in the hands of people. It's purchasing power. That purchasing power is an asset. Whatever you spend out of that money to buy goods and services is one thing. That corresponds to this magical equation, which is MV equal PT.
Yes.
I buy a donut or a coffee, $2. So I pay the $2. I get the muffin. I eat the muffin. That's it. It's gone. The money is in the hand of whoever gets that money. Get the money. It goes into the production to produce more muffin later on, and so on.
Yeah.
Now the second part, it is also an asset, but it's an instrument of debt.
Yes. Yeah, this is the point I was trying to get to.
It's an instrument of debt. What does it mean? We produce some of the money we use to spend for goods and services, and some we save. So what happened to that saving? We take that purse and then hand it to either to the banking system or hand it to the stock exchange.
Yeah.
So it is a debt. It is an asset to the person who saves. It is a debt to the bank.
Yeah.
Here again, you have that tautology. What is you deposit there exactly the same amount as what the bank receives.
Yeah.
But what the bank does? It takes that debt or that and transforms it into an asset by lending to someone, And that's how you create IOUs.
Yeah.
So IOU, you lend the money to someone, who lend it to someone else, who lend it to someone else. The question is, the money that goes through the savings depends where it goes. It goes to the banking system, then it's lent to someone else.
Yeah.
Well, some of it might end up in the hands of the industry, which is going to produce goods, houses, to produce, but some of it is used for speculation.
Yeah.
Example, we're talking about the housing market. I mean, you can go to the bank, get some money from the bank, they sign you a line of credit. Well, it depends what you're going to do with that money. If that money you use to buy a house and, hire someone to come and build your house and everything, that creates output. But if that money is used to buy an existing house, which is sold in the market to someone else, which uses that someone else also can go to the bank and get line of credit and then buy the house at a higher price and then put it in the market. A third person would come and buy the house. As you can see, how you create IOUs. And it is that chain of IOUs which end up. Keynes doesn't say that all the money is becoming, speculation. Some of it might. And those IOUs are just created, and they inflate the prices without really adding anything to the. And I think it's this, and this is part of the second component of the money, which depends on the interest rate, which I don't think economists understand. I mean, this is what you're trying to say earlier about when you were talking to the.
Well, yes, our number 4 thing is what determines the real rate of interest on loans of money. We'll get to that in a minute.
In a minute, yeah.
I just want to say, when I was in class, mostly for graduate students, but sometimes for the undergraduate students too, I would sort of take out a $20 bill from my pocket, right? And I would, buy something from a student, a pencil or something, whatever. And then one student would buy a sandwich from another student, right? And then another student might buy a notebook or something from the student with the same $20, and it would go around. At one point, one student would say to the other student, "Would you explain to me what's going on here?" Like this, and the student would explain, he's trying to illustrate, the circuit or whatever, and the velocity of circulation and all that stuff. And they would pay $20 for that. And then finally, I forget how the student would get $20, back. And I say, "Look, we've done great business here. We've done fantastic business here. Okay, let's go out and spend our profits. Let's go out to a restaurant. We might have done, $120. Let's go out and spend it now in a restaurant." Well, of course, you can't, because you've only got $20. And that you had that $20 to start with, right? And I said, okay, so what we'd be doing is what you're saying. We're just trading these existing assets and inflating the price of these existing, like the sandwich is now more than it used to be. Is it, exactly the thing you're talking about. The only part where value was created was where the only part that when one student was explaining to the other student, that's a genuine service they're teaching them. And that's the only new thing which is created, that teaching. And even then, they've got no money for it because the $20 existed in the first place. So I think that little example illustrated or brought home to the students these points that you were making.
Well, it's really interesting that you gave this example of a student, because in my likely story, I have exactly
this is great.
That case. I mean, here we have 3 people. Someone who's very bright, can write essays. Another one who is, who's good at, maybe in grammar and correcting the essays, and the third one is good at sport. And yet they're all in the same class. Now the question is, I say they can create their own money and exchange services. So in the sense, I can go to you, John. I mean, can I, we create this piece of paper, and you tell me, well, can you write me a story? I said, sure. And you pay me with a piece of paper.
Yeah.
So I take that piece of paper and I turn around to the guy who does, who who is good at sport, can you help me and train me in doing stuff, to train me how I can lose weight? So you take that piece of paper and you give it to him, and then he trains you, and then then you have the one who is good at, I mean, let's suppose that I took the example of a woman who's single, a single woman who has a baby, who is so busy she needs someone to babysit.
Yes, yeah.
So the guy can provide babysitting in exchange for maybe she can
do his essay or whatever.
Correct his essay.
Yeah.
So that piece of paper can just turn around, and yet that's money. You can create money.
But where are the money profits? Because it's the same piece of paper.
Okay, the profit. Now let's get back to that's a little bit more complicated. Now by the way, what I was just saying about Keynes and that extra element that we have to add to the magical, formula and vehicle PT is the creation of these IOUs in the market, which depends on how much we save and where the saving goes. That's the modern monetary theory, the MPT. I mean, people. I mean, we hear now that like they have invented something which in fact it's all in Keynes. We get back to
well, they talk about unconventional monetary theory. Unconventional monetary policy is just the quantity theory of money. That's all it is.
They get back to this. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, it's not unconventional.
It's tautology.
It's not unconventional at all. It basically in the early 20th century, people focused on interest rates, rightly, in my opinion. And then this quote unconventional monetary policy is just back to the old time stuff. It's kind of ironic. I mean, what happens is that the wheel turns round, kind of thing, in terms of theory. Before you're going to elaborate, I just remembered on the thing of IOUs. Of course, the point is that how do you validate those IOUs? I used to do another thing to the students. I used to write like an IOU. I promised to pay the bearer on demand $1 million in 100 years' time if I feel like it. And that's an IOU. And I hand it to the students. And how much would you pay for that IOU? As a matter of fact, it's worthless, because I'm not going to be here in 100 years' time. There's a clause saying I only pay you back if I feel like it. And, we're all going to be dead. In the long run, we're all going to be dead. The students, will humor me, and they might give me $1 for it. So you see, I've written a thing for $1 million, and the market only evaluates it $1. And I say, well, you're false, because actually the real true value of that IOU is zero. And eventually it will fall to zero. And the one that's paid $1 for it loses their dollar. It just reinforces your point, that it.
Well, I mean, in this example you gave, John, it's you creating a piece of paper and making someone else think that paper is worth something.
Yeah.
And the other person will accept your piece of paper on faith and trust.
Yeah.
Now, if you look at it from the macro perspective,
my students should know better than to trust me, by the way.
They might not trust you. That's why the system doesn't work.
Exactly.
It will work if we were in a small community where we know each other, but in the world in which we live, it won't work.
Yeah.
Now, from macro perspective, it's your savings, which is in the hand of the banking system, that creates these IOUs. And what are these IOUs? It's all these line of credit that the bank, are lending to the people. And they don't follow through. They don't care what you do with the money, as long as you can just
As long as you pay it back.
You pay back and you pay the interest. And they play on the large number, on the volume, saying, well, if I give you a line of credit, line of credit, line of credit, line of credit, I mean, 90% of people will pay, and they will. If I lose 10%, it doesn't really matter.
Yeah, exactly.
That's that. So the trust from macroeconomics doesn't have the same meaning as the kind of trust that you just said. In the long run or not, I mean, the debt is debt, and the debt is passed to, especially if it goes to the corporation, the people, the individual are, they're exchangeable.
Yes.
That's the.
Let's move on to how the monetary authorities, can control this, right? The language we used is what is the main monetary policy instrument, and the choices here are two. We talked about conventional versus unconventional monetary policy. The choices here, on the one hand, changes in the nominal policy rate of interest of the central bank, the Bank of Canada, for example, in this country. And the other alternative that Friedman and others suggested was direct control of the rate of growth of the monetary base. Now, I'm not sure how that could be done, by the way, right? Actually. But this is what the old-time monetarists, such as Milton Friedman, would have argued. What's your position on that? What is the main monetary policy instrument?
I mean, the main monetary policy instrument is the interest rate.
The policy rate.
Yeah, the policy rate. You see, what the central bank can do is just control the base money. So they can increase the amount of money they deposit that in the banks, and the private banks. The private banks, in turn, deposit that money into the central bank as a reserve from which they can draw. They wouldn't draw. I mean, it's just there.
Yeah.
So knowing that they have those reserves there, they can go ahead and they start creating money through this, the multiplier effect, or through the IOUs.
Yes.
You see, the world in which we live now is different from the world in which we lived in the time of Keynes. As long as we lived in the gold standard, which means that the growth of the money is linked to the growth of gold, and the growth of gold is more or less, since you have to dig in, get that gold out, out of the ground. So whether you use your labor to dig golds or you use them to produce car, that's where the labor goes, wherever the profits are higher. So the production of gold follows the production. Sorry, the amount of money available in the hands of people, that gold depends on how much gold is in the market, and how much gold there is in market is more or less the same as how much we produce. There's that kind of equivalence.
Yeah.
So Keynes, in a sense, thought, why do we have to use the money? And why do we have to use gold? Money, if we think of it as trust, or if we think as just something that can facilitate the exchange, as a matter of fact, the market develops that, because it's not the monetary policy to develop where the money is. And that's what Hicks says. It's the market which develops what kind of money. The money that we use in a very advanced economy, where you have an advanced financial system, that money is not commodity.
Yes.
It's not gold. It's not.
So we're getting back. Yeah, we're getting to the key
back
point.
To the key. And what is that money then? Well, that money is probably just a number in the banks, in the bank's ledger. That's the.
Yeah.
What distinguishes the money from other commodities? Now, you mentioned first the triad of medium of exchange, unit of account, and
store of value.
Store of value.
Yeah.
Keynes brought a different triad. He was talking about precaution, what is it? The transaction, precaution, and speculation. Those are the three, the triad. Where was going to go with this?
Well, Hicks, by the way, who also used the expression triad, by the end of his life, I mean,
Hicks tried a lot of
you were, just for the people know, that you were very close to Sir John Hicks.
Hicks introduced another triad. It's the running assets, reserve assets, and investment assets.
Yes, yeah.
So he tried to see how the money flows from, but again, he comes back to the savings, investment.
Yeah, but in a market theory of money, Hicks, it was down to two. Money was, let me get this right. It was a unit of account. He used a different expression to it, and it was a means of payment of debt. The store of value, the store of value just disappeared altogether. That's in, I forget which chapter, it's in the market theory of money. And
when Hicks
I mean, I see Hicks in particular as evolving his views on money, literally as the institutions were changing and as the geopolitical situation was changing as well. Like right up to his final days. I remember when you invited Sir John Hicks to Glendon College. It was, when was it, 1987 or something?
88. I mean, he died in 89, so he was just a year before.
Yeah, just before he passed away.
No, 87, because 88 we had that conference.
But I remember sitting with him and he was reading the Financial Times that morning, and some event had happened, I mean, and he was sort of, in a certain sense, bang up to date with the evolution of the monetary system as it stood at that time. And this was a guy who had been born in the year 1904, which was the height of the gold standard. And at that time, nobody would have questioned that money was gold, if you know what I mean.
Well, I think between 1900 and the end of the century, the world has changed so much.
Exactly.
The institutions have changed.
But Sir John Hicks was kind of rolling with the times.
And he tried to, I think he was profoundly influenced by Keynes, and yet he was fighting Keynes's ideas to bring him back to the, to the traditional thinking of how, economy is just, I mean, the economic activity is just made of all this supply of demands. And I mean, if you have n equations, n markets and they're all in equilibrium, so the last one should be in equilibrium, and the last one is used as money.
Yeah.
So it doesn't really matter which commodity or whatever you take, as long as they satisfy the triad, unit of account, medium of exchange, and store of value. I mean, that store of value is not just in the way things takes the way they change through time. You can't change you can't use fish as store of value, because tomorrow the fish might be worth to be zero.
Yeah, but by the end, the store of value had kind of just disappeared.
It wasn't the issue. Now
it was the means of payment of debt. Money is what you pay for debt when a debt has been specified in terms of money.
Now let's bring that store of value now to this second part of the second component of money.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
savings.
I mean, I guess what we're coming to here, I'm just trying to keep it to our four questions. The fourth question, this is going to be directly relevant. The fourth question, I wrote it down somewhere. We're now really into the area of what ultimately determines the real rate of interest on loans and money. I'm not now talking about the policy rate. I'm talking about the rate of interest in the market. My late colleague, Professor Meyer Burstein of the economics department at York University, used to say that John Maynard Keynes, this is Meyer's quote, had a monetary theory of the real rate of interest. Mayo was your colleague too, by the way.
Yeah.
I mean, same university, different campuses. Anyway, what do you think of that? That John Maynard Keynes had a monetary theory of the real rate of interest.
Yes, he did. And that came, he's absolutely right. That comes from chapter 17.
Yes.
At the entrance there, he tells you that the interest rate, the money interest rate, is simply what the value of the money now and what the value of the money tomorrow.
Yeah.
And you agree with me that I'm going to lend you the money for an interest rate of 5%. And then next year, you should give me my money back plus 5%. And he says, in the same way, we can find the interest rate for each commodity. Let's take wheat, for example.
Yeah.
Let's suppose that 100 bushel of wheat today, spot, is equivalent to 107 bushel of wheat forward.
Yes.
So the real, before I bring the real, the interest rate, the on real interest rate of wheat is 7%.
Yes.
But the wheat is exchanged in the money.
Yeah.
So if you, let's say, you borrowed the money now, hoping that tomorrow, you lend the money now, hoping tomorrow you're going to get 105. Unfortunately, 105 tomorrow will only get you, in terms of wheat, it would get you less.
Yes.
So it's the money rate minus the real rate, which is 7%, and you end up with -2 as a real interest.
Yes.
So he's right. That's in Keynes. It's the first, the first paragraph in chapter.
And it gets back, in a sense, to you were trying to divide up, in the demand for money, trying to divide up the two parts of money. That's directly relevant to this issue as well. So
let me just get back to what I was.
Exactly. That's what I'm trying to do. Get you
now the savings. I mean, you're a saver. You save money. You have.
I wish I was.
No, what I'm saying, just
one is a saver.
So they hand their money to the banking system or to the stock exchange, expecting to get a return out of it. So that's how they function. Now, those who receive the money, for whom the money at that stage is a debt, they turned it into an asset. They will only accept that money if they think they're going to make more money by lending that money to someone else or to the industry.
Yes.
So on the investment side, on the people who invest, they are comparing how much capital, what is the cost of producing unit of capital, and what is the return of that money invested to produce a new unit of capital. So they compare the marginal efficiency of capital and the return they can get and the cost, which is the interest rate. And they will only engage in, that's what Keynes says, they will only engage in investing if they think that the return in the future. You see, the price of commodity good is determined now. We just go to the market. But the price of capital is a forward notion. That's where all this issue of uncertainty and the future. So you don't know what it is. I don't know what's it. So I'm gambling. I might be right. This is what I'm going to get out of the investment is greater than the cost that the incurred in borrowing the money, or I can lose the money. The only people who can understand that are the people who are in stock exchange, and they take that to their advantage because they and I don't think most of us economists think about this forward or uncertainty or, all that disappears in the theories that we have. I mean, I can get back to
yes. Well, I mean, Keynes, of course, stressed uncertainty, and I'm very conscious of it myself in making my own investment decisions. But you're perfectly right. like theoretical finance that you would learn in a business school, it abstracts entirely from uncertainty. They may have risk. They may put a probability on there, but that's not the same thing. There is no probability.
Everything depends on the rule of thumb.
The
rule of thumb, for
yeah.
instance, the price of equity is inversely related to the interest rate.
Yeah.
So if the interest rate goes up, you can tell now the price of equity is going to go down and vice versa.
Yeah.
So they play on that. That's where their eyes is riveted to the central bank and try and see what they're going to do. And it's a really, I think it's terribly complex in the way the whole thing functions. But at the same time, it makes sense, you know.
I mean, I'm not sure that complex is the right word.
Maybe it's not.
It's actually relatively simple, but it can be complicated. It's actually complicated by all of these theories that people put forward. I mean, basically what they're assuming is that the mathematics is somehow true, that the mathematics somehow relates to reality. But reality is just what it is.
Mathematics, John, is just playing with these identities. And
yes, I agree. I have a little bit more of a nuanced position. I think that if you decide, as Keynes did, as you rightly point out, the first three chapters of the general theory, if you do your fundamental social ontology first, then you can devise a mathematics which is appropriate to that ontology. But what you can't do is you can't take a mathematics which was devised for physics, shall we say, and then apply it to economics, because it's a totally different issue. It's physical. In the physics, you're dealing with physical realities, if you want to put it that way. In the I don't really like to use the word psychological, but I don't know a better word. With human,
you can use psychological in terms of the animal spirits.
Yes, exactly.
Why do people invest? Now on the basis of something they just have a feeling it might work.
Yes,
or it might not.
It's not something that can be reduced to a mathematical formula. It kind of is what it is, kind of thing, right? Animal spirits, as you rightly say.
You see, the world has changed. You see, from the early 1900s to the 30s to, I mean, we did remain in the gold standard for a long time. So one of the most important things of what Keynes has done in 1936, he tried to decouple money from the gold.
Yes.
So let's think of this thing, which is money, which is an asset, and see how, because his concern is how can these people who are speculating there, they're making lots of money.
Yes.
The people are suffering, the rest of the economy, the working, let's just, instead of talking about the working class, let's just talk about the people who use their effort to participate in the production of wealth are not getting their fair share.
Yes.
So let's decouple the money from gold, and if this money has specific characteristics, which are the zero substitution. What is it? How did I say?
Zero
production.
What Paul Davidson said.
Zero substitution of production. Zero substitution of money and the carrying cost. So you create money out of thin air.
Yes.
But not knowing that money doesn't get into the economy directly from the monetary, from the central bank into the economy, it has to go through the banking system, and the banking system is the one that is creating these IOUs and then the money. Therefore, the banking system has to be controlled. It has to be regulated. It has to be. And that's also the case with, I mean, when we do VIXEL, I can come back to that.
Yes, we'll come back.
VIXEL never trusted the banking system.
as we've got to this point, I just want to be historically specific about when Keynes was writing. I mean, you mentioned, the gold standard was the old system prior World War One. If you think of Keynes's three books, the Tract on Monetary Reform, that was published in 1923. Well, actually, Britain was off gold. There was floating exchange rates. There was no gold standard at that point in time. So that's designed for one world. The Treatise on Money was published in 1930, and the world that Keynes was describing at that time was the restored gold standard. The gold standard had been restored from 1925, eventually collapsed in 1931. Then, obviously, not the general theory was again at a different historical thing. Britain was off gold again. So this need to decouple money from gold, to realize that gold isn't money kind of thing. Money's not a commodity. That was very important. I also realized that Keynes was writing and Hicks was writing during a period in which their civilization was collapsing. It was the end of the British Empire. This theory that empires and political regimes last for about 250 years. I think in the case of the British Empire, we can be pretty specific. The Bank of England was founded in 1694, which provided, the financial wherewithal for what we now call capitalism. It wasn't Britain at the time, of course. Britain only came around in 1707. But again, you do the math. 250 years on is 1944. And I would argue that the power of Britain, the role of Britain disappeared at Bretton Woods, at the Bretton Woods Conference in 1944. So it fits the last, how can I put it, the last 30 years of that, quote, British Empire and, quote, capitalism. I'm almost identifying the two. The last 30 years of it was what somebody called the Second 30 Years' War. Britain was all powerful in 1914. 30 years later, in 1994, it was gone, effectively, right? So I see what Keynes was trying to do and what Hicks was trying to do, and Roy Harrod for that matter. They're trying to understand the unraveling of their civilization. I mean, how do you respond to that?
There's a lot of
Does that make sense?
It makes sense. I think it makes sense. You see, a lot of criticism of Keynes comes from the people picking up things here. He said this here, and he changed his mind, and he changed that. You see, Keynes's theory is found in the treatise and the general theory.
Yeah.
There are principles, it's logical, it gives you a blueprint of how, if you want to understand how the economic system functions. Now, if you compare this, you can compare this to the OPEC, for instance. They get together, they agree on how much they should be in the market, how much, when they go home, everyone is cheating, instead of, So that's the position of Keynes. He says, well, as far as the theory, this is my theory. Now, when I look around and see what's happening to the British Empire and what happened to it, everyone is cheating out there, so I have to change my mind. He's for free trade, but if everyone follows, if we all agree on what, which is,
the whole free trade thing was, in my opinion, and we were getting onto different topics now, was a kind of a fallacy. I mean, actually.
Well, I should maybe use a free trade.
No. Really and truly, what made Britain powerful, was not free trade or anything like that. It was mercantilism. It was mercantilism.
I mean, they were the ones first to cheat in the system. It's out of cheating for centuries.
What was done was that they made their money the money. If you found the Bank of England and you make your money, it's not really gold, it's not really anything like that. You make your money the money that people have to go to. right? This is happening now with the BRICS. Like money is becoming, what's created in Russia or what's created in China, right? They're, you know, the guard is changing. Maybe we're being overly pessimistic here, but I think it's important. I think it's important to ground these theories, in kind of realities of history and, literally the rise and fall of civilizations. And there's no doubt we're living through the fall, of a civilization right now. And again, this is a philosophy blog. I realize that when you think about it, all of the great, we read, say, Aristotle or Plato and think, oh, these are great theories to describe, democracy or whatever it is they describe, or in Plato's case, philosopher kings. They were responding to the collapse of their civilization. In short, you're not required to think about things if your civilization is kind of functioning and working, right?
Yeah.
But when your civilization collapses, you're kind of forced to reflect on why is this happening? What can we do about it? Et cetera, et cetera.
One of the things you see, it's always the nations who are the most advanced who dictate the rules of the game.
Yes.
To the rest.
Yeah.
I mean, of course, the Brits, they were very powerful. They were, there was a time where they were the one who dictated the rules of the game.
And it comes as a shock when that doesn't happen.
Shock, you see, whether you can keep the gold or don't, it doesn't make any difference if you have a neighbor who is more powerful than you.
Yeah.
I mean, in terms of economics, I'm just talking about economics. Then they started dictating the rules of the game. And that's what happened in 1944.
Yeah.
When how the Americans, they just didn't want to listen to Keynes or anyone else.
No, exactly, because they were in charge.
They were in charge. They were in charge. And again, you see what was happening in the 30s. I mean, it's the Marxian theories started to become more and more, more and more powerful. The Soviet Union started to become very powerful, and of course, I mean, they didn't like the way the world was functioning. They would have liked to see the world functioning like themselves. So they started influencing other countries and bringing them to on their side.
Yeah.
On the other hand, you have the Hayekians and the free traders at that time who were pushing one direction. So Keynes was in the middle there. He was just trying to navigate and say, what can we do to make sure that our society can, can like what we're doing, because after all, it's the societal interaction that makes a nation.
Yes.
Now, how can you do that when you just gone through the, through the
World War
Depression? No, I'm talking about the Depression.
Oh, World War I and the Depression.
The Depression, where half of the population was, unemployment very high, and that capitalist world, which was kind of glorifying the stock exchange and the wealth and everything, ended up collapsing and taking with it half of the society. And yet you still had another half of the society, which was living just like if the 29 crisis didn't exist. So from from the theoretical point of view now of his treatise and then the John theory, he was saying, well, what can we do to bring in some of sanity to the income distribution and make sure. So his idea is to say, well, if we can increase, in the gold standard, the money capital in the market was restricted by that. So he thought, well, if we decouple the money from the gold and then use just these things which we call money and asset, which is we can increase that without cost, we can increase it without increasing it doesn't cost much to produce money. I mean, just However, how are you going to get that money into the system? So you have to have a banking system which you control, who can control the money and make sure that the money should go where it should be.
Yes, we're back to our second issue.
Where it should be is to create wealth by creating wealth you increase you increase you increase the output, you increase the
Yes.
level of employment by increasing, by mere fact of the market pressures. If you produce more, you need more labor, so
Yeah.
the wages will go up. And at the same time, by putting enough money in the system, that will reduce the scarcity of money, and that will go against the people who,
Yeah.
who
No.
speculate.
Exactly. So I just want to touch on then, my fifth debate, and that's precisely what that was, you know, is money new? We used to talk about, monetary neutrality. Let's, for the sake of argument, talk interest rate changes. You change the policy rate of the central bank. We used to say monetary neutrality versus non-neutrality. If it's neutral, it doesn't affect anything. If it's non-neutral, it does affect things like employment and growth and so on. Right. So that's one point, is money neutral or non-neutral? Number two, you referred to it earlier with your L-shaped diagram.
Mm-hmm.
Does this only apply in the quote short run, right? Or does it apply in the long run also? By the way, on that topic, go back to Keynes again. Keynes famously said, "In the long run, we are all dead." Now, I'm not so sure about that myself, because here we are. I think you'd agree it's already the long run. And you and I, at least, are still alive and kicking. At least, I'm going to knock on wood. So maybe in the long run, we're not all dead. But anyway, yeah, I mean, can you sum up, neutral versus non-neutral, long run versus short run?
Well, there's so much to say, John. We could be talking there for days. Anyway,
Yeah.
Money is neutral and non-neutral at the same time.
Well, that's a fine answer.
Yeah. It is neutral when you think of it as the money which is used for transaction, the first component of the first component of what money is, you see. It's non-neutral on the second component because, as I say, the same money now is not the same as the money tomorrow. It's not the same as the way it's lent to someone else and so forth. All this creation of IOUs. By neutrality, you have to bring in the store of value.
Yes.
I mean, is my saving now the same as my saving tomorrow?
Yeah.
The answer is no.
Yes.
Because you're saving tomorrow, it depends what happened to who is taking care of, who's taking care of it. I mean, your saving that comes from your pensions, which is in the hand of this corporation of there. You don't know what they're doing with it, and you don't know how much they're going to make out of it, and you don't know how much they can return to
Give
you.
to me, yeah.
So the neutrality in that sense, I think, it doesn't apply to that second component, and
yeah. Well, as you say, we can go on for a long time. I mean, I think
there's much more to say, but I think maybe
well, we'll do more we'll do more videos. We'll kind of we'll progress with different videos.
What I suggest is we just go back to what we have said and then try and correct and see, and of course see what the reaction of other people say.
Yep, exactly.
Then we can
So anyway,
in a sense, just to finish, John.
Yeah.
Everybody's right partially on a different perspective, but when you put the whole thing together, then you see that
there's a difference between partial truths and the whole truth kind of thing.
The fallacy of composition.
The fallacy of composition. Yeah. No, that's I very much agree. Well, look, thank you very much, Omar. And I've learned a lot today.
Well, thank you very much. You made me think in the last few days, because I was thinking, saying, well, how am I going to respond to,
the questions,
questions. So I went back to what I have written. But I mean, in fact, it's not what I have written; it's what other people have written.
Well, but you have to put it together, though. That's the point. You have to kind of, as you say, each of those other people has partial truths. what your task is to kind of bring it together. Anyway, I really have learned a lot, and I thank you, and we'll do this again. So, eh bien, à la prochaine. Dans l'avenir, nous parlerons de ton nouveau livre.
C'est moi qui vous remercie.
Bon.
Thank you.